Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. I am proud of you, my sons. Tonight, you have learned the final and greatest truth of the ninja. That ultimate mastering comes not from the body, but from the mind. Hi, my name is Zoe. That's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back, friends. This is the 151st episode of Backlook Cinema, the podcast. We take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. Now, if you like what you're about to hear, then please tell your family, tell your friends, and tell that radical, funny-looking dude in the trench coat about our humble little show. Now, I've been out for, I guess, a week. Last week, I put out a bonus episode, and there were some issues and complications with that episode. We'll talk about that later. But I'm back this week, back with a brand new guest. I'm excited for you to hear what he has to say. He is an actor, writer, producer. He's been in indie films, and he's out there just doing the work. He's the inside man on what it means to be in the entertainment industry. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for my very special guest, Jeff Macolino.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Joe.
Jeff Macolino is from the Jeff Macolino Podcast. Thank you for joining me, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm excellent. I'm excited to be on the show. I'm a fan of the show, and I'm a fan of you, Zoe. I mean, I held you hostage for like 2 hours when we did my podcast, so I'm returning the favor.
Yes, you are about to be hostage, strapped to a chair to enjoy this one-on-one, this conversation that we're about to have about this fantastic movie. And on that, just since we're talking about this movie, let's talk about that. I gave you the grand list of movies, and on that list was a movie from both of our childhood. We're about the same age, and you chose the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from 1990. So why did you choose that movie?
I love the Ninja Turtles passionately. It's one of the first things I remember loving. So as a kid, I remember it was either my third or fourth birthday. I was obsessed with turtles, and my parents were getting me a pet turtle. And my grandpa Pat knew about my obsession with turtles, so he went to a toy store and bought these Ninja Turtles. My parents were not thrilled because they were weapons and all this other stuff, and I was 3 or 4 years old. But that basically just got me, hooked from a very young age. Turtles are my favorite animal still, and the Ninja Turtles. I'll show you this. I almost drank out of this today in honor of this episode, except for I would die. There's the camera. I would die if I filled this cup up and drank from it.
Oh, now when you say die, do you mean like literally, like is it lead lined or something like that?
Oh no, I'm just drinking whiskey. So if I drank a straight out of that glass, I would be in trouble real fast.
Okay.
I mean, it would be a great challenge. I would have to really test my ninja abilities to see if I could master and get through.
Right.
And I'll say this too.
I guess the secret is not to fill, because that was like a 16-ounce tumbler. Am I correct?
Yeah, this is just a pint glass. Yeah, 16 ounces.
Right. So you don't want to fill it up with whiskey. Maybe like put 2 fingers down, right?
Yeah. Well, 2 fingers in that is still going to be a hefty load, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big glass.
Yeah, and the Ninja Turtles they just boomed at the right time for me. Like I was talking to my kids literally this week in the car about who their favorite Ninja Turtle was. And I said, well, I knew the strategy in kindergarten. Everyone in my class wanted to be Raphael or Donatello. So if you wanted to be one of those two, you could be them maybe once a week at recess. But if you chose Michelangelo, like I did, you could be Michelangelo every day of the week because people, I still don't understand why, young kids, I think it was just a color, orange is not as cool as purple or red. But I got to be Michelangelo every day in kindergarten on the playground. So that also helped shape me into who I am today.
Right. That's funny because Michelangelo is also my favorite turtle for two reasons. Not because I'm particular to the color orange, but because the nunchucks were my favorite weapons. And that's because Bruce Lee always impressed me with his nunchuck skills. So I was always, uh, you know, hypnotized by the nunchucks. And they do have a way of hypnotizing you, the way that
Yeah.
you can twirl them and wrap them around your body and all that kind of stuff. And the other thing is that I never actually seen Bruce Lee use like the other weapons, maybe the bow staff, but I never seen him use the sai or ninja swords, the katana. So yeah, that's really why I was. And then Michelangelo had that surfer attitude, like he was like the dude that was not that he was trying to be the most laid back turtle. Like he wasn't
Yeah.
saying the things he said to try to be cool. He was just the most laid back turtle. You could easily see him as like the burnout dude, right?
Yeah, they in the cartoon song, which is obviously the first thing I watched as a kid. In the cartoon, it was Michelangelo as a party dude, and it's like,
Right.
yep, how is he not everyone's favorite?
Right. How is he not everyone's favorite? So there have been a number of TMNT movies. Which one is your favorite one?
And this is funny. I was having this debate. I was golfing earlier today with two of my high school friends. So there are three 37-year-old men having a debate about which Ninja Turtle movie is the greatest. And I'm like, that's awesome that this far later. I was torn between the original and number two. My buddy said the Turtles in Time, or the third one, I think it is, was his favorite. And I think that's crazy. I think number two had the best music. It had Vanilla Ice come in, right? And
Yeah, it did have Vanilla Ice.
so I'm like, I remember that music being really catchy, but I feel like the first one's probably a better movie. It's probably the grittiest of the three.
Probably. Yeah, the first one. I think that you're right because as we'll talk about in the trivia, there are a lot of people that had a problem with how dark it was, and dark in tone, and probably even dark in appearance because a lot of the movie took place at night. But I think they were talking like a lot of people had objections to like the violence and the weapons, and I think that was because people, especially in the 90s, were very sensitive about children being exposed to violence. I don't think it's as much of a concern right now, but it's like back in the like late 90s, the late 80s and early 90s, you had like the violent video games, you had violent cartoons, there were congressional hearings. So people were really, really sensitive about that sort of thing. But I remember when I went to the theater, I loved it. I was actually a little bit older than you when I saw it. So when I first started learning about the turtles, I learned about them through people who collected the comics. That I never actually collected the comics because the comics were like you would have to go to like a specialty shop,
Right.
like an actual comic book store to get one of those comics, or a bookstore. And the closest thing that was usually available to me was a 7-Eleven, and that's where I usually got my comics, and they didn't have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So it's like I kind of enjoyed, not really even enjoyed them. I just would talk about them with friends who collected the comics until the cartoon came along. And when the cartoon came along, that's when I really came on board with the Turtles. I really loved the cartoons that came on in the late 80s. So that's my familiarity with them. And I understand like the difference between the cartoon and the comics is that in the comics they all had the same color headband. So the only way you could, I mean, not headband, mask. They had the same color mask.
Yeah.
The only way you could tell them the difference between them is with the weapons that they carry. And even when they went to color, they didn't. When they started publishing color comics, they all still had like red masks. And so, but that was really my only exposure was the cartoon until the movie. So I always had a fun time. It was like I always had like an affection for the turtles. I think I've seen pretty much all of the turtle movies. And
Yep.
most of them I didn't like until Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. Have you seen that one?
Is that the newest one that Seth Rogen did?
Yes.
I I think I enjoyed it. I'll be honest, I had to stick up my butt the whole movie. And it's not going to be why you think. It's because they got all these A-list actors to have like 3 voiceover lines and like Paul Rudd. And I'm like, did Paul Rudd need 10 grand or whatever? Like, you could hire anybody. Nobody's coming to see this movie because Paul Rudd has 3 lines in it. Like, that would have been like the biggest thing in my career. Like, one of the biggest things in my entire life if they paid me $100 to say 3 lines in that movie.
Right.
So I had to stick up my butt very early at all of the A-list cameos that were like, really? Why are they wasting so much money? That's a whole other ball of wax. But I got into it even with the Mario Brothers movie too. The same thing. I'm like, are people really going to see this movie because Chris Pratt? Like, I like Chris Pratt. I love Chris Pratt, and I think he did fine. But like, you could have gotten a bunch of no names, and people are going to go see it because it's the Mario brother. Like, people want to see that. I think maybe I don't grasp how much celebrity matters. But yeah, no, that's why. So from the beginning, I'm like, really? They paid this guy to do that little part? They could have paid me a fraction of that, and I would have been like running through the streets naked, screaming, "I'm in Ninja Turtles!"
Right. Yeah. It seems that the larger studios have kind of gravitated towards like career voiceover or voice actors in favor of like screen actors, like celebrity screen actors. And I think, as what you say, is a lot to do with celebrities, because it's not just kids going to the movies; it's adults bringing their kids to the movies. Like some of them, I can understand. Like a lot of the actors in that movie, you could tell who it was. Like you could tell that was
Yep.
Ice Cube playing the Fly, and you could
Yeah.
tell it was Jackie Chan playing Shredder. Most of the other ones, like the Turtles, I think those were younger actors. I don't think they
Yeah, I
quite
only knew one of the turtles.
right. I think they were not quite up to the level of celebrity of say Ice Cube is, but I think most of the adult characters were played by noted screen actors. I forgot, there was a guy, the scientist, like at the beginning of the movie. I forgot who played him, but I want to say he also plays the Watcher in the Marvel What If series. I want to say it's the actor, but I can't remember.
Oh, Jeffrey Wright.
Yeah, I think it was Jeffrey Wright that was playing that role. So yeah, a lot of like and like you mentioned, Mario Brothers, a lot of the Disney animated films, they kind of, and Disney had been moving in that direction for a long time. And usually it's just like the top characters, but now it's like all of the characters.
Yeah. It just, and I'm not, I guess it's jealousy in the long run. I'm not, but it's like, come on, man. Like,
Right.
you didn't need the couple $1,000s to do this just to get another credit. Whereas, an unknown actor could have done just as well. There's no
Yeah,
difference. And the thing
absolutely.
with the Ninja Turtles, I don't remember hearing about any of those big name celebrities being in the movie ahead of
Right.
time.
There's
So it's
only
like you didn't even market that Paul Rudd's in this movie. So
right.
it didn't need to be. Like,
Uh there's actually only one big name actor in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This the one that we're talking
yes.
about now. And he was there just as a lark, because he thought it was just going to be a direct to video rental. So he didn't know it was going to do the way it did.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
he probably
there's one other big name actor who had a tiny role, I would say, in the 1990s Ninja Turtles.
right. So since we're talking about voice acting, that kind of leads to, and you kind of answered this question already, but I was going to ask you if you would do voice work, and obviously yes you would.
Yeah, I would do anything to be a part, especially of the Ninja Turtles universe. Just I
right
voice any
right
character. I oddly enough have only had a couple of, one for an audio book and one for a short film that I've been told exists, but it's not even on IMDb. So I haven't got many voiceover roles. I haven't really auditioned for many, um, but yes, I would absolutely do voiceover work if it came to if it came available to me.
Right.
But yeah, it's a you mentioned me being an actor. It's a tough gig. I'll share with you. I can't share too much, but literally after this podcast, the writer and director and the audio guy of a movie that I am going to be producing and starring in are coming over here to meet with me. So soon there'll be news because I think we're going to be shooting it within the next couple months. So that's kind of I'm making my own way here. I'm paying to produce movies starring me at this point, just to give me acting work,
Right. That sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a risk, but it's sit around and wait or go get it, right? I'm
Yeah.
gonna go get it.
So speaking of indie films, you were in the indie film Haunted Happy Hour with Jack Bremmen. So you're kind of answering this question if there are more movies like that in the pipeline. So I guess with this meeting, this is one of those opportunities.
Yeah. Well, Haunted Happy Hour was one of the best experiences of my life. We shot that feature film in 9 days. I mean, we were on set a lot of times and I was the second lead in the movie, so I wasn't, anything more than an actor. But I was on set for between 12 to 14 hours, like most of those days. And it was a blast. I mean, I realized at the end of that movie, the same thing happened when I was a lead in another indie film called Women Want Everything. That near the end, like the last few days of shooting, everyone starts being like, "Hey, we should do a sequel." And I realized why. It's because you get so close, especially on an indie film. We're not going back to our trailers between sets. We're all hanging out in a room together. So you get so close and you realize like these people, we've spent 80 hours together. Like if you think about it, your best friends, you don't spend 80 hours with them maybe in a whole year. Like if you really think about the time that you spend together, getting to know each other, talking about everything. So I'm like, I think that's why so many crappy sequels are made, is because everyone's like, we got to do a sequel because the only way we're all going to be together again is if we do a sequel. Now, so I'll say this: there's a lot of cast and crew from Haunted Happy Hour that are going to be in this next film that I'll be doing, and probably the future ones after that as well. Because I want to be around people who are fun and just good people. So it's an interesting community because you're always one step, the whole Kevin Bacon thing. You're always so connected to people that you wouldn't realize. And in Haunted Happy Hour, Eric Roberts is in it. So I'm basically one connection away from every actor in the universe because Eric Roberts has been in 750 films. So
Right. And TV shows.
yes, well that's one of my great. I was watching with my 11-year-old son. We were watching Chuck, that old TV show. And there's an episode where it's guest starring Dave Bautista, special guest star Eric Roberts.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm one step away from everyone in this episode. And Dave Bautista,
Absolutely.
now I'm 2 steps from Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm right there. Which ironically puts me in with Kevin Bacon. So there you go.
Right. You're right there. So you could say that you're like 2 steps away from Kevin Bacon.
Yeah. I hacked the IMDb game of how many connections before I get to this. By being in a film with Eric Roberts, I'm now never more than 2 away from anyone.
So you were also in Pawn Stars to America as a seller. So were you an actor in that, or were you actually selling something?
That was an interesting thing. So it was basically just it was legitimately, you had to bring your own item to sell. And it was an interesting mix of people, because it was like half actors who were like, I can make $150 for 8 hours, or I think it was longer than that, but basically $150 for 8 hours. Like, yeah, I'm not doing anything on a Monday, Tuesday, whatever it was. And I'm a fan of Pawn Stars. So I was like, this is cool. But there was also the other half of people who were dedicated Pawn Stars fans, or like really wanting to sell their item. So it was an interesting mix of people like sharing their credits and, actually like, I want to sell this. I'm really committed. It kind of ruined the show for me, though, because I saw how the sausage was made, and I'm like,
Right.
oh man, this is the furthest thing from reality that exists. And I'm sure every reality show is like that, but it was like, I remember they had me standing behind Chumley when he was negotiating something. And I had to listen to this negotiation 8 times. They had already bought the thing. They just had to negotiate on camera. And I turned around when they finally were like, all right, we got it. I turned around and I'm like, you know how much I wanted to say? I'll pay you $50 more than what they actually paid you. And I'm like, but I'm pretty sure they would kick me out and not pay me. And Chumley laughed. He's like, no, I wouldn't have let them do that. That would have been hilarious.
Right.
And I'm like, I would think so, but.
So were you there? Like, so you were selling an item?
I had an item. I didn't meet with them on camera to sell it, though.
Okay.
But everyone, there was a place everyone went where they would make you an offer still. But this was off camera. But I had a binder with like 50 political buttons. My dad collects them, and I collected some as a kid, usually just his overflow. But it was really cool, because I hadn't touched those things in 20 years, and probably 25 years. And going through some of them, I'm like, look, I've got all these different Kennedy buttons, and obviously before my time. Not the current RFK, the old RFK and JFK. And I thought it was cool. I had a Reagan for governor, and then a Reagan when he was running for president failed, and then when he won president, and then when he won re-election. I'm like, I could sell these to a Ronald Reagan fan, I think. It didn't make little shadow box. So no, it was fun reminiscing and actually looking over those, because it was, other than Ninja Turtles and sports cards, that was the only thing I collected as a kid, were political buttons. So it was, but yeah, no, it kind of ruined watching the show for me, because I'm like, oh, this is so fake.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't need to know how the sausage is made, because it's like, that's actually one of my favorite shows. Well, it used to be. I don't watch a lot of television like I used to, but I did watch that a lot, and I also watched Storage Wars, which I feel like it's kind of related to.
I love that show,
and there's probably a lot of fakeness with that too. But at least they have like the same people buying all of the time. It's not like they got like different people. So I guess the main buyers of the storage unit, they're just there every time, and fighting over these units, and that's entertaining. I don't want to know how that's made, because I'm pretty sure if I find out how that's made, it'll ruin the show for me. So I don't think.
I'm sure there was planting of items in lockers to make it more interesting, and a lot of the drama was probably fake.
Right. I imagine how many times they have to open the locker, and it's because they didn't get a particular buyer's reaction.
Yeah, let's do that again. We didn't get out, let's do that again for safety. We got to get another tape for safety.
Right.
Yeah, I wonder how many times with the auction that they had, and that would ruin it for me, seeing that they'd be like, all right, he won it, now let's film it dramatically.
Right.
You're like, oh, that would suck.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, I don't know if that happened, but.
So you're a host of the Jeff Macolino Show. Tell people about what your podcast is about.
I basically, I would say I talk to anyone I find interesting or has an interesting topic they can discuss. So I've had fellow podcasters like yourself. I think the most common guests are probably comedians, stand-up comedians, actors, writers. I've had astrophysicists, biologists. I've had a flat earther, um, ghost hunters, past life regressionists. I run, anyone who I'm like, I want to learn more or kind of just figure things out. I had actually the guy who created Storage Hunters. They came out the same year as Storage Wars. I had him on the show recently. I think I was too drunk to ask a lot of good questions probably in that one, but drinking, there's a lot of drinking involved in the podcast, but, it's the a couple guests ago, the guy I had on said, this is the most Joe Rogan-esque podcast I've ever been on. And I'm like, take that as a compliment. I mean, love him or hate him, he's highly successful. So if I'm doing anything like him, I'll take that as a compliment.
Right. So this is since you mentioned the flat earther, I was scrolling through your podcast and I saw that. I didn't get a chance to listen to you yet, but I want to ask you: was he able to convince you that the Earth was flat?
He was not. He had. I will say this, and that's one of the excuse me, one of the few episodes that I put on YouTube because he had a whole green screen presentation where he was showing stuff. It was complex, and I'll give him credit for the presentation. And he had an answer, honestly, to every question I asked. That being said, there was something he said about pilots. They all know that the Earth's flat because the way they fly. And I had a couple of pilots on the podcast since then, and I always asked them, like, so is the Earth flat? And they're like, what? And I'm like, well, I was told you would know that the Earth is flat. They're like, no, it's not. I can see the curve when I fly.
Right. So can everybody on a plane. But the funny thing about that is that the person who told you that, they said that the pilots would know. Obviously, if you countered with, well, I talked to a pilot and he told me that the Earth wasn't flat, the guy would probably say, well, of course he would tell you that. He's supposed to tell you that.
Yeah, they'll kill him. They'll kill him if he tells the truth. And I'm like, who's they?
Yeah, because
I like, what I think? I love a good conspiracy, right? And I don't consider conspiracy theory a bad word like some people do. I love it because I consider it a brain exercise. Like, okay, let's connect the dots. If this is a conspiracy, who's doing it? Why? And Flat Earth is the one I could never crack. Like, who's doing it? Why? Who benefits from this?
The why is the problem. The why is the problem because
there's no. It's like this doesn't just connect. Like, there's a lot of things I'm like, oh, I don't know if it's true, but damn, you've got a compelling case.
Right.
Dude, I can connect these dots in my head, and I'm not an investigative journalist or anybody who really cares whether it's true or not. To me, I'm just like, this is like some people play Sudoku. I'm like, I want to talk conspiracies and see that my brain can still map it out. And the flat Earth is just like, it's just not. The who and the why just don't. They're not there. It doesn't make sense to me. So no, I have not been convinced. But to be fair, if any flat earther is listening to this right now, they're like, those stupid roundies. Like they have I don't know if that's the one, but they have like a slur, for lack of a better term, of people who think that we live on a round globe instead of a flat Earth.
Right.
And that cracks me up too. Like, it's like, really? you're judging us? Okay, that's fine.
I mean, if it helps. So I remember I forgot her name, but it was a comedian. She had a joke that said something like, what they call people in school who don't believe in scientists? F students, right? So Jeff, go ahead and plug your social media, your websites, your whatchamacallits.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the Jeff Macolino podcast is probably my favorite thing to refer you to. It's available pretty much everywhere you can find podcasts. I've got a YouTube channel that I've completely neglected for the past week and a half. The main bringer of views from that is a thing called Drunk Jeff Eats, where I get new fast food items and eat them, and I'm intoxicated. So those can be really fun depending on my levels of intoxication, because I'll riff sometimes, and most of the times I edit it out because I'm a bumbling idiot, but sometimes it stays in. So those can be fun. And then I'm on X and Instagram at Saint J Mac. I've had especially the Twitter handle for so long that it's like, well, I guess I got to stick with the Saint J Mac thing from now on. And that's pretty much it. And then I'll have movie Haunted Happy Hour will be out soon. Before Halloween is what I was told. Women Want Everything is it's a movie. You can find on Prime. All I did was act in it. I didn't do the audio or the cinematography.
Right.
And then, just stay tuned, because I will have some high quality movies, indie movies, low budget indie movies, but they are going to be high quality. I promise they will, or I will spend more money to make them better.
All right, that's good to know. So, speaking of movies, let's go ahead and talk about the movies that we just recently watched. Tell the people about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It came out in 1990.
Yes, so there's a hidden crime epidemic in New York City. A complex series of theft with no witnesses or suspects. Investigative reporter April O'Neil suspects that these thefts are linked to a mysterious underground criminal network known as the Foot Clan. But the NYPD is less than helpful. When April has a run-in with the culprits, she is rescued by a quartet of unlikely crime fighters. Anthropomorphic turtles mutated by radioactive waste, trained in ninjutsu, and no older than teenagers.
Yes, a fabulous concept. This movie was released on March 30th, 1990, produced by Golden Harvest Company and Limelight. It grossed over $135 million in the US and Canada, and over $202 million worldwide on a reported budget of $13.5 million. Now, I like to adjust that for inflation to give everybody a better idea of what that would look like in today's dollars. So in today's dollars, it would have grossed over $324 million, which is bonkers. And worldwide, it would have grossed $485 million, which is almost $500 million, off a budget that would have been $32 million. So that's now we know why there are so many sequels to this series. We know why there are so many sequels, because they are trying to replicate that profit, that incredible amount of profit that they got when they made this movie. That is incredible.
It blew me away when I saw those numbers, because I'm like, yeah, it probably made 20 million, 30 million. Like, it probably made money. But holy God, this was a just killed it. Unbelievable. Yeah. And I think it was one of the highest gross independent films. Crazy, insane numbers.
At the time, it was the highest grossing independent film for its time, and then it got beat by a later film, and we'll talk about that later. But yeah, I had no idea how much money this made. All I knew when I watched it is that I liked it.
Yeah, it was a good movie.
Yeah, I remember I took it was me and my brothers. I took them to the movie theater. We drove in my mom's car, and we watched that movie, and it was just a fantastic experience. So what we got a bunch of actors in this movie, but I can't say that there are well-known actors. So let's get it started. Start us off with the first actor in this movie.
Yeah, so Judith Hoag played April O'Neil. She's also been in Armageddon, I Am Number 4, and Roll With It.
Yeah, I have not. I don't remember her in Armageddon or I didn't watch I Am Number 4. And then I saw a bunch of other movies that she was in, and I didn't recognize her from those movies. But she's a busy actor. She's in movies. She's in TV shows. She's in a lot of stuff. I feel like she's never taken a break. So I don't know. And she has a very distinctive cleft in her chin. So I don't know how I miss her. And she looks like today she looks as about as much as she looked way back in 1990. So yeah, she's out there. She's doing the work. I guess she's the type of actor that kind of blends into her role, so you don't notice her. So that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, and I don't think this is in the trivia for later. I think she refused to do the sequels because she didn't like the amount of violence in the film. So
yeah,
put
she
one
didn't
on
like
the tally board.
right. She didn't like the violence, and she didn't like the what you call it. She didn't like the hours because she had to work.
The shooting schedule was real tight, right?
Yeah. Well, she had to work long hours. Like all the actors had to work long hours, and she didn't want to work those hours. And the other thing is that I think there is a very specific thing that happens where people thought that the violence went too far, and we'll cover that in the trivia. So the next star or the next person on the roster or the call sheet is Elias Koteas, and he played Casey Jones, and he's been in The Thin Red Line, Shooter, and Fallen. So I haven't seen any of those movies, and I don't think I would recognize him in those movies, but he had a very magnetic appearance in TMNT.
Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't have more. I don't want to say more success because that's not a fair thing to say, but he did a great job, I thought, in his role.
Yeah.
So and he's a good-looking guy. Like I'm surprised he didn't get more work. And maybe he didn't want it. I mean, there's always that.
Right. I thought he did very well in this movie, and I also believe that, I feel like he should have been a bigger star, like you say, but he's also been given a lot of work. Like he's kind of busy, so it's like I think it's not like he's. I saw that he hadn't stopped working, so there's that. Like he's not a huge superstar, but at the same time, it's not like he disappeared from acting.
Yeah, nothing wrong with being a working actor.
Right.
All right, so this next guy's my favorite because he's the only person who was also both in the suit and did the voice, and that's Josh Pais, I think is how you say his name. I apologize to the actors for my pronunciation of their names, but I think
it sounds good to me the way you pronounced it, though.
Yeah, and he's been in Joker and Check Out. But again, mad props to him for being in the suit. And again, I don't think this spoils anything in the trivia section, but he also was in the scene where Raphael rolls over the cab. He was the passenger in the cab who said, "What was that?" All of the costumed actors did have cameos in this movie, at one point or another.
Right. I didn't have that in the cameo, but that is in my what you call it in my trivia list. I didn't have that, but you are correct. All of the actors in the costume did have some bit parts outside the costume. I think there was one particular one also played like a foot soldier. So, or a member of the Foot Clan. So yeah, they were all, they had to be judicious with their actors. They had to, it's like, we can't afford to hire all of the actors that we need. So you guys are going to be pulling double duty since you're wearing costumes anyway.
Yeah. They had no clue how successful they were going to be. That's the thing I got from reading in the background. I'm like, they didn't think this was going to be a successful film at all. Right. But shout out to the guy for doing the voice acting and being in that suit. And I think he broke his nose in a scene as well.
Yeah,
I don't know if that. I don't remember if that's in the trivia either.
Yeah, I think I did put that in the trivia. I wasn't sure if it was him or if it was another turtle, but yeah, one of the actors did break their nose. We'll find out if I put it in there later. So the next person is David Foreman. He played Leonardo.
Yeah, in the suit.
Yeah, he was in the suit.
And then the voice of Leonardo was played by Brian Tochi,
right?
Who was in Revenge of the Nerds, Police Academy 3, Back in Training.
Yes, I remember him from Revenge of the Nerds, and I think I remember him from Police Academy 3, playing a very stereotypical Japanese person trying to be a police officer in the city. Although my memory is real fuzzy because I think I've only seen Police Academy 3 once, and it was decades ago. So
yeah, it's hard to pull the memory from that far back.
I don't remember the specifics. Up next, we have Leif Tilden played Donatello in the suit, in his Donatello suit.
Yes, and the voice of Donatello was definitely the biggest star at the time. Corey Feldman, you know him from The Lost Boys, Stand By Me. I mean, he was he got the "and" credit at the very end if you watch the credits.
Yeah. They put him at and featuring or also starring or a special guest star, Corey Feldman, right?
Yeah, I know that from acting. You want to be the first or the last. You want to be the "and" or you want to be the lead billing. I mean, second's fine. I'll take second.
Right. Yeah, second's good. Yeah. Up next is Michelin's sister. He played the body of Michelangelo, my favorite character.
Yes, mine as well. And Robbie Rist was the voice of Michelangelo. He was in Balto, which is something else I have not seen.
Yeah, he hasn't done a lot of movie work, but he's done a whole bunch of voice work. This is, I believe, a traditional voice actor. And so when I looked at his IMDb, he had a lot of TV and just a lot of TV credits, but really not a whole bunch of voiceover credits for movies. Like it's really just the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Balto, as far as movie credits is concerned. Up next is Kevin Clash. He did the voice of Splinter. He was also the original voice of Elmo on Sesame Street, and then he got into some sincere issues and complications, accused of sexual misconduct. So they was like, well, we can't have anybody accused of sexual misconduct on Sesame Street. Like he wasn't charged. It was past the what do you call it? The
statute of limitations.
Yeah, statute of limitations or something like that. But he's always denied that he did anything wrong. I think I remember seeing like a couple of interviews with him defending himself, but that's kind of a shame. It's either shame that he's actual sexual predator or it's a shame that he got accused of doing something that he's innocent of. But either
way, it's a shame.
right. Either way, he's out as Elmo. But he did after that had an appearance in the Happy Time Murders, which I thought was hilarious.
When I watched this with my son, I was like, can you believe that guy, that voice is the guy who does Elmo? He's like, that I would not have guessed.
Yeah, I would not have guessed either.
I would have guessed 5 other people before. I would have guessed all the Ninja Turtles before I would have guessed that Splinter. So I mean, he did a good job.
Yeah, he was great as Splinter. I would not have guessed that was the same voice as Elmo.
No, not in a million years. We talked about Splinter. Let's talk about the Shredder. James Saito was played the Shredder. He's actually been in some stuff. Always Buy My Maybe and Love Hard, but he's been in other stuff too. He's had a decent. I'm like, well, I've seen this guy in several things. I was kind of surprised that he was only the action version of the Shredder. He was the guy in the suit.
Yeah,
he did not do the voice.
Here's something funny. Most of the characters, or at least now I won't say most, maybe half of the characters were done in had a voiceover actor playing the voice, and while the another actor played like the body. And so I was surprised that the Shredder was one of those, because it didn't have to be. This guy is he's an actor who has acted
Yeah.
in other things. And so, like, why not have him say his lines? But I guess they wanted somebody with a voice that was more reminiscent of the cartoon. That's probably one of the reasons. And along those lines, another actor who, well, actually, this actor just did the voice. So David McCharron, he did the voice of the Shredder, and he also did the voice of Oroku Saki, which is the same person as the Shredder. I don't know why I said it that way. That sounds weird. And, and the only significant credit I found him on was Popeye. But yeah, it's weird that like he's doing the voice of the Shredder when the actor playing the Shredder could have did his own voice, because I think they probably modulated his voice artificially somehow, like they put it maybe through a computer, or maybe David McLaren really does have that messed up voice.
That great Shredder voice. Yeah, maybe. But yeah, that was the biggest surprise to me, I'd say, in the credits. That actually, I'll say this: I was shocked. The next guy we're going to talk about had a different voice actor as well. Toshishiro Obata played Tatsu. He was in Demolition Man and Black Rain. Now he was just Tatsu, the character, not the voice.
Yeah, that's crazy. This is one of the like he's a member of the Foot Clan, but I don't remember him being in the cartoon. And the cartoon follows the comic closely. I have no idea if this character actually appeared in the comics. And that's what they kind of did with this first series of movies, that they did introduce a lot of characters that were neither in the comic or in the cartoon, which kind of threw me off. It's like, if you're going to go through the trouble of, like, especially in TMNT2, if you're going to go through the trouble of creating a new monster, creating a monster, why not use a monster that had been in the comics? Like, why we got to create a new monster that had nothing to do with the comics? I mean, come on, we're fans. Throw the fans a bone.
Yeah, there were some odd decisions along the way. I think that's. I will say this: one thing about Ninja Turtles that's consistent is inconsistency between the comics, the cartoon, the movies, the new cartoons, the new movies. I'm like, they just the origin story changes all the time. April O'Neil's profession changes. Splinter. Yeah, we'll get to Splinter. I think I'll bring that up. I don't know in a good way or not, but yeah, they always change stories. It's interesting,
but I did like that Tatsu. I did like that character. He was what you call it. He also did he's a video game voice actor, so he's done a lot of video games. If you played a video game, then it's a very good chance that Michael McConaughey had was one of the voices in those games. So he was the voice of Tatsu, and he's also the voice of Kano in Mortal Kombat 10 or Mortal Kombat X, and like a ton of other video games, but not much movie work, not much TV work, just video games.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. But he did a good job.
Yeah.
Now we get to the actor is Michael Turney, the character Danny Pennington. Michael Turney was also in The Cost of Living and The Spike of Bensonhurst.
Yeah, and I don't recognize him in anything. He's a fine working actor.
Fine working actor. Nothing wrong with being a working actor.
Right. Up next is Jay Patterson. He played Charles Pennington, and he's been in Norman and Nine Lives, and same with him. Not familiar with a lot of his work, but also another fine working actor.
Yes. And Raymond Serra played Chief Stearns. He was in The Purple Rose of Cairo and Manhattan. I looked through his IMDb. I don't know that I've seen him in anything else because I haven't seen those movies. But he looks familiar, so I'm like, maybe he just fits that stereotype of being the chief.
I
Like,
think, well, he's been in a lot of movies, so I think that I think we've both seen him. Like, I don't recognize him, but he has that kind of face that says, yeah, I've definitely seen this guy before. I don't know where I've seen him, but he's
yeah,
definitely been like, he's probably been on a, what do you call it? What do you, is it? I'm LA Law is popping into my head, but that's not Law and Order. He's probably
yeah. I was going to say a lot of those crime procedurals he's
yeah.
probably been in.
He's probably been on
As
that.
a cop or the chief of police or something.
Right,
Yeah,
right. He's probably been on CSI. He may have even been on Murder She Wrote. I'm pretty sure that he's been on one of those shows because he definitely has that face where that I've seen before. And
yeah, absolutely.
and speaking of someone I've seen before, there's one of the actors in there, and when I seen him, like when he first appeared on screen, I was like, I know that guy. I don't know where I know him from, but I know that guy. But it didn't bother me. You know how like you see somebody in a movie or something, and you want to know the name, and it's so distracting that you can't think of the name of the actor or where you saw him from, because
Yep.
the familiarity is just hitting you in the face, and it almost takes you out of the movie. So that happens to me a lot, but it didn't happen with this actor when I saw him. For one thing, he wasn't in the movie like a whole lot, just a few parts. But the other thing is that he wasn't so familiar that it was bugging me. So when I was putting this together, I was like, oh, that's Sam Rockwell. Of course, that's Sam Rockwell. He is the head thug in the Foot Clan, and he's also been in Moon and Iron Man 2 and a bunch of other
a zillion other things.
movies. Like one of the best actors, the most successful actor on this roster. This is like his origin story. Part is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or at least this is part of his origin story, because he is one of the most critically acclaimed actors alive right now.
Yeah, he's definitely the biggest star on this cast. And that I loved that because I had no memory of him. And by the way, we'll talk about it in a little bit. I don't think it's in your trivia, but he flubbed a line that was actually meaningful. But he flubbed the line, and they kept it in the movie. But yeah, I love this because I'm like, look at this guy. 20 years before he was successful,
Right.
and he's out here in the what 20th character in the credits in this movie. And I love when you see that. I'm like, see, this is a guy who grinded and made it. So I loved that, and I loved when my son was watching the movie. I'm like, you know who that is? He's like, no clue. I'm like, it's Justin Hammer from the Marvel stuff, and he's like, oh, I wouldn't have guessed that in a million years. I'm like, I know, because he's like 20 years younger than you ever have seen him before.
Yeah, just barely growing facial hair, just out there grinding.
Yeah, no. So shout out to Sam Rockwell. I was pleasantly surprised to see his name in the credits, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I love that. I love when you see the actors before they hit.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's move on to the director who directed this magnificent film.
It was directed by Steve Barron, who also did Choking Man, Coneheads, and Rat.
Yeah, the only movie that I recognized when I looked through his IMDb was Coneheads, although admittedly I was kind of in a rush. And I didn't really, he hadn't really done a whole bunch of projects and not many films. So it's weird that's a movie that has made $135 million off a $35 million budget would not be more successful. That's a kind of weird. You would expect him to have made more movies. But it may be something that happened to him that I wrote down in a jury, and maybe that's the reason why he
I have a feeling we'll discuss him more.
Right. So this movie was written by Kevin Eastman, Peter Lard, Bobby Herbeck, and Todd W. Langen. So Eastman and Lard, they created the characters and the comics that this movie was based on. they created the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And for those of you who don't know, back in the 90s, comics books were inundated with teenagers, mutants, and ninjas. So, especially ninjas. There were a surprising amount of ninjas in comic books.
Ninjas
So,
were in.
right. So, the comic that they created was supposed to be a parody of all of these character tropes in comics. So, they made Teenage Mutants, kind of, and this is kind of like model after like the X-Men, because the X-Men were mutants, and they're the most popular characters in comics at that time. So you had Teenage Mutants, and then the ninjas, and some, for some reason that I don't know why. I think this is the parody part. They made them turtles. So the and also along the ninja theme were the clan that they fought. So they fought the Foot Clan, and this is actually a play on the Daredevil enemies known as
the hand.
the Hand, right? So Daredevil has the hand, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle has the foot. So that's that's funny. When you say it out loud, that's actually funny. Herbeck, he wrote the story, and this is his only movie. And Langan, he wrote the screenplay with Herbeck, and he wrote TMNT Secrets of the Ooze, and this is also a lot. These are only two movies that he made, and he probably has credit for Secret of the Ooze because he wrote this movie. So I'm not exactly sure the extent of his involvement with the sequel. So just people that kind of got together for one moment in time, created this blockbuster film, and then kind of like disappeared like ninjas themselves.
Yeah.
Well, except for Eastman and Lard, they pretty much stayed in grinding, I guess, but the other two kind of disappeared.
Yeah, so if this is in the trivia, cut it, but I don't think it is. So just to pay off when I said Sam Rockwell flubbed the line. So he says in the movie, check out the East Warehouse over on Lairdman Avenue or Lairdman Island. He was supposed to say the warehouse is on the corner of Lairdman and East.
Right.
No, I'm sorry. Reversed, I think. Anyways, he flubbed the line, but it was to pay respect to Eastman and Laird, the creators of the comic.
Right.
I flubbed that whole thing. Like, I just Sam Rockwell.
You Sam Rockwelled it. But he still got East, and he got Lard in there. He still got it in there. So for anybody who was looking for it, I wasn't at the time because I didn't know who wrote the comics at the time. So I wasn't looking for it. But the crazy fans who are really into Eastman and Laird, they knew, they were.
Yeah, those
satisfied.
Easter egg YouTubers would have been all over it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't even watch them as much anymore. I used to be really into it, but I don't even watch it because it's like sometimes they'll do a trailer. They'll do like a breakdown of a comic book trailer, and the breakdown will be like 30 minutes long, and the trailer was only like 2 minutes. It's like I don't really want to watch.
You're thinking too much about this trailer.
Right. I mean, I have to be real curious to, and then sometimes they'll spoil it for me. I think that's why I kind of stopped watching them as much, because they'll make guesses, and their guesses are so good that they actually spoil the movie. So that's why I don't watch them as much.
Yeah. I agree. Or you get expectations that then get stomped on.
Right.
Which is also not good.
Right. Also not good. So tell us about the music.
The score was by John Duprez. He's done UHF, A Fish Called Wanda, and Once Bitten. It was pretty good. I think it was a solid score. I think Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 was a little better, but that's a Vanilla Ice, advantage, right?
Yeah, with the needle drops. Yeah, they did. They went big on that movie.
Go Ninja.
Right. But I did enjoy the soundtrack for this first movie. I thought it was real good. it was definitely solid, almost hummable, right? It was
Yes.
memorable. It felt unique to this movie. I thought that John did a really good job on the soundtrack, and then he's also done some really high profile projects. And like I said, I kind of truncated these notes, but he's done a lot more things. Usually, I might, for somebody that does the score, I might do like 6 or 7 of their credits, but in this I only have 3 of them. But like one of them is Once Bitten, one of my favorite movies. I hadn't watched in a while. I'm almost afraid to do a podcast on it because a lot of their humor doesn't like translate to today. Somewhat
Yeah, that
a little
can be a
insensitive.
problem.
Yeah, actually asked somebody about that, and he said, "Man, don't worry about that. Just go on and make it." I was like, "Okay, I keep that in the back burner. I'll keep that in my pocket."
Yeah,
It's
I'd say
like
go for it too, but
right.
eh.
It's like kind of like Revenge of the Nerds. It's another one. It's that would be something I have to be very careful about because when we watched Revenge of the Nerds when it first came out, it was all fun and games, right? It was like, yeah, they're just some teenagers and they're just having some fun. But when you look at it nowadays, it's like, oh no, that's actual rape. That's actual sexual assault.
Yeah, I had this the other day with I watched with my 14-year-old daughter, my 11-year-old son. I'm like, let's watch this movie because I want to see how poorly it's aged. We watched I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry, but I think it's from
Right.
2006.
Yeah, that's not
And
that
there are
old.
so many things that don't age well. But I'm like, but actually, the heart of the movie, I feel like is good. There's a lot on the peripheries that are like, oof, words and things. I'm like, or to me, I'm like, it just cracks me up to see my kids who are like, what did he just say? And he said it again and again and again. I'm like, that's they probably played that in the trailer. Like,
Right. They probably did.
it's a different time.
Yeah,
2006, not that long ago.
right. Not that long ago. That was yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I guess it is kind of close to the end of the 90s, but we're still learning how to respect people, right? And so that
Yeah, and they I think they really tried. I think it was
right,
just
right.
it what was acceptable to say and do and stereotype back then was just different. But
Yeah.
but the heart of it, I'm like, see, they're really trying to be like, hey, stop judging these people. I'm like that. They got the heart. It's just it doesn't age well. Everything else does.
I think I hadn't seen I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry, but the premise kind of reminds me of Three's Company or Bosom Buddies, which I don't think I think that those two sitcoms would play today, especially Three's Company once you understand the context because we don't have like apartments that only rent to one gender anymore. It's like that's a very old
Yeah.
fashioned way of doing things. But no, actually no, that wasn't Three's Company. That was Bosom Buddies that did that. So Tom Hanks and another guy whose name I can't remember disguised themselves as this is before your time too. They disguised themselves. They dressed in drag on purpose in order to rent an apartment that only rented to women. Like it was their
Mm.
rules where you couldn't be a man and rent this apartment. You couldn't bring a man to your apartment. It was only for women and girls. And they desperately needed some place to stay. So they dressed in drag so that they could buy, they could rent from this apartment. And so anytime they was in their apartment, they were women in drag. And then when they got to their jobs, they had to dress as men because they weren't pretending to be women at their jobs. So it was fun. I think it lasted for one season. Somehow it was one of my favorite shows. The first time I got exposed to Tom Hanks, it was hilarious. And then Three's Company's kind of the same way, where he's like, it's a guy, he's pretending to be gay so that he could be a roommate of these two women, right? So
Yeah, two beautiful women.
right, two beautiful women. And it's like he had to pretend to be gay because the because of the attitude of the landlords. Like, as far as landlords is concerned, it was inappropriate for a man
It's a sin.
for an unmarried man to stay with unmarried women. And one of them, I think he eventually hooks up with anyway, but it took years. It took years of them staying together.
Yeah,
So,
it's fine. But like Tootsie, probably, I don't know how that's aged, but Mrs. Doubtfire is still good as far as men
oh
pretending
yeah,
to be
absolutely.
women.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man.
Different reasons for that, though.
Yeah, yeah. Especially what's her name? Sally Field. It was you the whole time? The whole time, the whole
The
time.
whole time.
That's a I feel like I need to rewatch that now. I gotta put that on the list. It's not on the list of movies.
That's at least a once every 5-year movie.
Right.
For me. Maybe 3 years. Like I gotta watch it every once in a while.
Yeah, yeah. So now I got some announcements. I mentioned earlier about bonus episode number 27. I want to apologize to all the listeners about that episode, not because of my opinions of Deadpool and Wolverine. I stand by those opinions, but what I apologize for is the horrible audio. I had no idea the audio was going to be either bad. I had a podcast like audio only episode, and then I had a video episode. They share the same audio. The video episode came out perfect. If you can watch it on YouTube, and the audio quality is exactly as you would expect it to be, but the audio quality on the audio only podcast was horrible, and I don't know why or how that happened. And I by the time you hear this episode, I will have fixed the audio issues for the episode, but it takes a while for the issues to be pushed out through the RSS feed. So maybe give it a week. And if you're inclined to hear my comments, you can go back and you can listen to the audio only version or go straight to YouTube and look at the YouTube video. It's only about 15 minutes. I goosed it up, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm sorry. That's all I'm saying. I take full responsibility for the quality of this show. And the only other announcement is that I had an eBay shop for years. I called it Bazaar de Alonzo because I thought I was being clever, and I just sold a bunch of odds and ends and extra stuff and bits and pieces. And now that I've moved, I've switched apartments. So and in the moving from one apartment to the next, I've got so much that I need to get rid of, and I don't want to just throw them away, and I don't want to just give it all to Goodwill. So I want to try to make an effort and try to sell these items. So I will leave a link in the description of the store, and maybe you want this stuff. I don't need. I got extra action figures that are still in their packaging. I've got an extra, what do you call those things? Strainer. I have an extra pizza roller. I don't need 2 pizza cutters. maybe you could use a pizza cutter. It's used. It's a used pizza cutter. So I don't know.
Yeah, sign it.
And it could be yours. And all you have to do is go to eBay to check that out. So those are all the announcements that I have, and now we're going to go to the next part. We're going to talk about our 5 favorite parts. Jeff, why don't you tell the audience, tell the people from around the world one of your favorite parts from one of your favorite movies.
So this would probably be the scene that I would say was my least favorite until I watched it with my son a few days ago, because we laughed hysterically. And that's the way my brain works, right? Like if you can share a laugh with a loved one over something in a movie, that makes it now great. So the scene where they're all like meditating at the fire,
yes,
and they summon Master Splinter. So I say to my son, I'm like, I don't remember what part of being a ninja was like summoning spirits of people or like, telepathy. And he's like, even worse, why didn't he just tell him where the hell he was?
Yeah.
And I'm like, Yeah, so we're crying laughing at this part of the movie, which is not supposed to be a part you laugh at. But
Yeah.
the fact that we had that reaction, it's now it's my favorite memory of watching the movie is laughing with my son at something we both thought was a little campy, a little stupid. But I'm like, that's great.
Yeah.
So that's in my memory now forever, is like that moment of the movie where we're both like, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I too thought that was a little weird. It has shades of Star Wars. And to answer you and your son, to allay your fears, it's not that big of a plot hole. Usually when a person is kidnapped, they are blindfolded or they're hooded and they're thrown in the trunk of a car a lot of times. And so they don't know where they're going. So they don't know where they end up. That's usually the case. So maybe that's why Master Splinter doesn't know. And
so Splinter doesn't have the Liam Neeson skills.
Right. He doesn't. He's not Liam Neeson. He's not Sherlock. He's not Sherlock Holmes. He can't tell. Like, because Sherlock Holmes is, he knows London so well that he can tell. Like, if you throw him in the trunk of a car, he can tell by which way the car is going where he's at in London. That's how good he is. But Master Splinter does not have that skill. But he can send his spirit out. He does have an astral projection if you concentrate.
Apparently.
And just to give them encouragement, let them know that he's okay. So, I thought that was kind of weird, but I was like, well, it's fine. It's not the worst part of the worst movie I've ever seen. It's not. It doesn't bother me that much. It'd have been nice that they had done some detective work and they found out where Master Splinter was, but it's fine. I can get past.
Well, again, I now view it as a positive moment. So
right. One of my favorite parts is when April first gets rescued. She gets rescued by Raphael. She doesn't know. It's like it's at this point where they're really trying to stay in the shadows. They don't want to be exposed. On a sideline, I really it's like Splinter wants them to stay hidden for the exact same reason in this movie as he does in Mutant Mayhem. He wants them to stay hidden because the outside world doesn't want to understand, wouldn't understand them as mutants. But what's really funny that in Mutant Mayhem, he was really paranoid. So that made it really enjoyable for me. But so Raphael is in a blackout fight and he's fighting. The screen goes black. He's fighting the assailants of April O'Neil, and then he's in the sewers before the screen comes back on. So I thought that was really cool. That was one of my favorite parts. I thought that was really well done because they were trying to be cheeky with the turtles. They want to reveal them at first. I was like, okay, yeah. I like the way they have the slow reveal of the turtles, and they the same way they have the slow reveal of most of the characters in the film. So
I love that as well. That's it, she stole and she got one of his size.
Yes,
which really makes the whole movie happen. So,
right.
I'm going on humor again, and I had to pull this up to make sure I say this correctly. One of my other favorites, inappropriate probably nowadays. Donatello says, "You're a claustrophobic," and Casey Jones says, "You want a fist in the mouth? I've never even looked at another guy before."
Yeah.
That had me cry. Like, oh my God, this is a PG rated movie. But I guess that was fine back then.
Well, see, they didn't say any words. Like there were no words.
True. That's true.
It was only an implication, which is why they can get away with it. And you're right, it was funny. And it's funny because the thing about it is that even nowadays, heterosexual men do not want to be referred to as homosexual. They just don't do it. They are very sensitive about that. And some of them more than others. I think now, like me as a cisgendered man, I'm more chill about it. It's like, nah, dude, I'm not gay. I can say that and not want to kill somebody or anything like that. But back in the 90s, that was a real possibility. It's like,
yeah,
you accused It's more like an accusation instead of a supposition. So they feel like they're being accused of wrongdoing. So like, no, I'll fight you. So it's like, no, chill out, dude. I said
Yeah, well, that makes you
you
so less gay. You wanting to just jump on another dude because he called you gay.
right.
Yeah, I think I'm like you nowadays. I'm the last person who's like, are you gay? And I'm like, no, but thank you.
Right.
I'm like, I'm glad. Like, I wish I dressed as well as a gay man.
Right.
Like, I take this as a compliment.
Right. And then another thing that makes the scene work is that Casey Jones is already prone to violence. He's already ready to fight somebody, right? Because it's like
Yes.
During, I think it was the same rescue of April, like after Raphael beat up the bad guys, like he comes along and he wants to beat him up some more. It's like, and Raphael's like, you don't have to do this. It's like they're already taken care of. And Casey's like, no, I feel like I need to beat him up some more, right? So that speaks to Casey's character, that he's immediately ready to fight when somebody calls him gay.
Yeah. No, it fits his character. He's got that personality about him. But that line, my son didn't find it nearly as funny as I did. But I'm like, oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, that's funny. So another one of my favorite moments is this is a moment that kind of sticks in my head. Is they basically kind of steal the pizza. They don't steal the pizza, but they like they order pizza. They know that the delivery man is not going to find where they stay at, so they basically trick the delivery man to think that he was late. So the pizza is $13 and they get $3 off the pizza because the delivery man doesn't know that he has to deliver to a great underground and not like a regular like house or business that delivery people are used to delivering to. So that's a funny part.
You're making me strip all. I'm going down on the list now because you're taking my favorite parts. The thing I love too about that scene, there's two other things I loved. Knowing this after the fact, the actor, the pizza delivery guy, was Michelangelo in the suit.
Sweet.
So he gave himself the pizza, and also it was Domino's, very prominently displayed.
Yeah, absolutely. Prominent.
Pizza Hut was the one who marketed the movie.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
Like, they obviously didn't know, and they didn't have the ability to change it in post to Pizza Hut.
Right.
But Pizza Hut was the main company who spent a lot of money advertising this movie. And it very, very prominently is a Domino's pizza that gets slid in the grate. Although being slid down, I'm like, that pizza's ruined.
Yeah, I'm thinking that same thing. I'm thinking the same thing. It's like, how do you deliver a hot pizza and slide it vertically down a grate? I was like, how is that supposed to still?
All the cheese is on one side.
And then the other thing about it was that apparently the pizza wasn't cut. So like when they got it down to the sewers, and then one of the turtles threw it up in the air, and Leo had to cut it up. And I was like, wait a minute, this pizza isn't cut already? What kind of? I guess they had to ask for that specifically, and maybe that helped the integrity of the pizza to slide it vertically down, is that it wasn't already cut up, so it was able to maintain its shape. See, we solved it. We talked it out. We solved it.
Yeah, well, if it was hot enough, I guess the cheese could have reoriented if you just held it a little slanted the rest of the.
I'm pretty sure that the cheese would have been a little messed up. But yeah, you're right. If it's a little slanted, then that probably would have saved the pizza. Yeah. So yeah, it's, and then if it has enough of a crust on it, like at the edge, maybe the edge would keep the cheese from touching the top of the pizza box. Maybe that'll work. I'm not going to try it out. I'm not going to try to figure it out. I'm not going to do a scientific experiment.
No, we need a Mythbusters this pizza delivery.
Yeah, I don't need the Mythbusters. I think we adequately solved this mystery.
Yes, I believe we have. I think I'm already on my number 5 because I think we've liked a lot of the same things. But one of the things I noticed that I loved, excuse me, was the sports references. He referenced Wayne Gretzky was an
Yeah.
obvious one with him, but also Raphael got a bat from Casey. You look at it, he's like, a Jose Canseco bat? I hope you didn't pay money for this. And I'm
Right.
like, this great. Like it tells you the time that they're in.
Yes.
Jose Canseco was already a joke back in 1990.
Right.
So I'm like, I gotta, that tickled me a little bit. Like, I was like, oh, that's good. And also, I'm a big sports fan, but I like a lot of, I'm using air quotes here, folks, but nerdy, stuff like Marvel and Ninja Turtles. And I'm like, I like when you don't act like they're two separate camps. Like, they should get the reference.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I like when you combine, a little jock and a little nerd, and that's kind of my sweet spot. Like, just like we don't have to be one or the other. We can be both.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And they did have a lot of dated references in this movie that I can't imagine anyone like that much younger than we are getting. Like, because they had a moonlighting reference. They had a reference to I'm trying to think of another one. That's the only one I can think of right now. The moonlighting reference. It's like, yeah, I remember that show. So also one of my favorite parts was I can't remember what number I'm on. I think I'm on 4. So this would be my 4th favorite part. Is the nunchuck fight. Like, it was during one of the big battle sequences, and one of the Foot Clan, he has a nunchuck and he starts twirling it around, and then Michelangelo steps up and is like, "Oh, a fellow chucker, eh?" And then they started having a nunchuck twirling contest. And I was like, "Oh man, this is awesome!"
Yeah, that was great. That was arguably, even though there was no real combat in that moment, that was maybe the best fighting scene in the movie.
Yeah, yeah. That was I thoroughly enjoyed that contest. So especially when I watched it like the first time, when I first went to the theaters to watch it, I think I was moonstruck over watching that scene. I can't think of an appropriate exclamation. I was moonstruck.
It's
Go ahead and pick another one.
Yeah, I think we've eaten through my 5 between the two of us, but I'll give this one a shout because I feel like it's an important one. Even though I don't like this backstory, it's true to the comics, not the cartoon, which is more my thing. Master Splinter being a rat that had a owner who was a ninja master.
Right.
I don't like it as much as him being the ninja master who got mutated into a rat.
Right.
I don't like that story as much, but I do like the fact that they were true to the comics in that. Just, it's respectful to the comics. I do like the storyline better that he was a ninja, because it's kind of weird to think, oh yeah, because I learned all these kung fu stuff. My rat in a cage, he learned it all too. And Shredder obviously had no clue who this giant rat was that he was fighting, as opposed to, and I'm blanking on his name, which I'm embarrassed by, as opposed to when Splinter was the guy who was his rival, whose wife he killed or whatever. That I think that's more intriguing, but I respect it because it is a much better, more intriguing storyline. And they just went the way of the comics. So I've got to give them some props for neglecting to do the easier, better storyline and staying true. So it's like I don't like that you did that, but tip my cap to you for doing it, because that is what the original story was that Splinter was just a rat who had an owner who was a ninjutsu master, better than Shredder. So I don't know. I tip my cap for going against what I think cinematically is clearly an easier and better route to make him his actual rival instead of his rival's pet.
Right. Yeah,
So
especially since the pet in the movie, it kind of looked strange. It's campy looking. You had the little rat throwing kung fu, basically practicing martial arts. He's practicing ninjutsu. So that was funny looking, but it was
yes,
but I don't think I had a problem with it at the time. I just thought it was curious, I guess, at the time. But it wasn't like it didn't break me. It's like I've already accepted that there are giant mutant turtles. So it didn't bother me that much that a rat would train with his master to learn kung fu. But it's like on the second watch, I was like, yeah, that's a little goofy. Well, I don't know if this is my second watch. I think this is my like 12th watch of the movie. It's kind of hard to say, but yeah, it was. But I hadn't watched it in quite some time. But it's like I think it's something that it kind of it looks really goofy, but I too enjoy that they had grabbed from the comic instead of the cartoon.
yeah,
So the last thing I want to mention is the costumes, the costumes, the animatronics, all of these things that went together to bringing the turtles to life. They were obviously the most complex part of the process of bringing this movie forth, and they did a fantastic job. It's like even now, a lot of that still holds up. It looks really good, and
yeah,
it's like a lot of the problems that I might have had with it when I first watch it, they're still there, right? So you can see the line where the head and the neck kind of separates when the turtles are looking up. So for some people, they were like that might like break the suspension of disbelief, or another thing would be that even though they look like they had muscles, it's like their muscles never move, like they never adjust to when they're extending or retracting their muscles. So that would look weird, but at the same time, it's like it doesn't break my enjoyment of the movie. It was like, well, it's a constant reminder that these are men in costumes, but at the same time, I don't care. The story was good enough where I didn't care about that. And overall, the costumes were so impressive. You could tell that they leaned toward the cartoon versions of the characters as far as character design, and I was just thoroughly impressed. Despite
yeah,
the minor uh the minor complaints that I might have had when I watched it at the time, I was still my overall feeling was just being impressed that they were able to pull it off. Like they move naturally. They looked like they could fight. They had moves that were specific to the turtles, to being a turtle, like crushing people with their shells or stuff like that I really enjoyed. There was one part where Michelangelo ducks his head inside of his shell when somebody was trying to beat
yep,
it. And then he pokes his head back out of his shell and he says, "I love being a turtle," because specifically a turtle could do something like that, whereas a person could not. So I really love the costumes, and I liked
yeah.
Shredder's costume. I like uh Tatsu's costume. What is his name's Tatsu? I did forget
Tattoo,
about
yeah.
Tatsu. I liked his costume. I think I liked his better than Shredder's costume. Um
I
and
think
then they had,
Splinter was the weakest.
well, he was a puppet, so it's not really a costume. He was a puppet. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and I guess that's why.
yeah. But as a puppet, still, what you call it? Probably not the
Well, this
strongest,
was
because it doesn't he being a puppet doesn't lend itself to you kind of knew it was a puppet. I think that's why.
yeah, and this was 30. I mean, they shot it 35 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's what's great to me. These turtles look better than the newest iteration of the live action. I'm like,
Oh
they
yeah.
got it better. in 1990 than they did in 2014 or whenever the hell those movies came out.
I think that if the story were better, then we would feel differently about it. But the story
was terrible.
The story was bad. So because the story was bad, it kind of colors our. And then there's a really different design. Like the turtles in the original movie were already large, but the turtles in the new movies were gigantic. Like they were absolutely massive. And then when they did this latest animation, the animated version, what they did was they made the turtles younger. Like in the original movie, they're around 16 or 17 years old, but in the cartoon that just came out, they're around 14 or 15, and that really changes the characteristics of the turtle and how they act. They're just learning their kung fu. Is like, I mean, their ninjutsu. Like I feel like they're just learning how to fight, or they're even in this original version, they're getting into combat for the first time. But I feel like in the cartoon that just came out, I guess they allowed the turtles to get beat up more, I guess. It's more like they wanted to impress upon the audience that they're still learning their craft. They're going to make mistakes. They're a lot younger, etc. So
you reminded me about one more thing I hated about the new movie. One of the Ninja Turtles had a baby voice.
Yeah,
I don't remember which one, but it was like, and I'm like, oh no, like you're not supposed to be like a 3-year-old. He had like a prepubescent like baby voice, and I was like, come on, man, just give me post-puberty Ninja Turtles.
Right.
Like, it doesn't need to be a man's voice. It doesn't need to sound like this. But don't give me. I'm like, oh no, your voice annoys me, character. I don't remember which turtle it was. But every time he spoke, I was like, it hurts my head. I don't like children.
I might have to rewatch it just to find out. Actually, maybe I don't have to rewatch it. They have a brand new animated series that's based off of that movie, and I think I'm going to try to watch that so I can see for myself which turtle that you might be talking about.
I think it'll be fairly obvious because my children actually commented on this too. Like, that turtle he's different than the other three.
Right.
Like, yeah, I don't like that he sounds like he's a baby.
Yeah.
It's not, it doesn't draw me in. But I don't like children. So what are you going to say? I like my children, just no other children.
That'll do it. So that's it for our favorite parts, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed that part. Why don't you write in comment section, let us know what your favorite part is, and we're going to transition to the next section. We're going to talk about the top 10 trivia. So this is trivia I found on IMDb. Hopefully it's correct. It's debatable, but I was in a rush when I wrote this, so I didn't get a chance to fact check each of these points of trivia. I didn't cross-reference it with other sources. So I'm going to just assume that these things are true. So Jeff, talk about the first thing on the list.
Yeah, I love this one. So Robin Williams, who's a big fan of the franchise, provided Judith Hoag with information regarding her character, that's April O'Neil, through his comic book collection. The two were co-starring in Cadillac Man when the Turtles went into production. The Turtles film went into production. I love that one because I'm like, Robin Williams.
Yes.
We already mentioned Mrs. Doubtfire, so it's appropriate.
The thing is that I love that, to find out that Robin Williams enjoyed, like, was a fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and then when he found out that his co-star was going to be in a live action movie, he was like, I got you, read these comics, I have you straightened out, I'll make sure that you do a proper representation of April O'Neil. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I love that, even though her hair wasn't red, but
yeah, that's why people dye their hair. So this was the highest grossing independent film until the Blair Witch Project. We kind of talked about this earlier. Blair Witch Project came out in 1999. It made $135 million at the box office. Well, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles made $135 million at the box office and $66 million in the foreign box office. So yeah, it made a lot of money. And man, that was awesome. It's awesome to see independent films do good.
I concur. Crossing my fingers here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but no, again, this is the thing that stunned me the most, that this was like a huge success financially. And again, the more I read about it, I think the creators, all the people involved were not expecting it to be that huge of a success, but it speaks to how Ninja Turtles really swept the nation. I mean, like, it got all the young kids, and our parents were like, "Oh, this isn't so bad. Like, I
Yeah,
kind of enjoyed this myself." So it really hit that sweet spot that's so hard to get, where you get kids and adults.
yeah, yeah.
So more trivia. This is another one that I love. One of the early ideas floated around that the film would follow a similar approach to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, in which actors would be interacting with animated versions of the Turtles. However, this idea was quickly scrapped in favor of pursuing performances in turtle costumes from Jim Henson's Creature Shop. Luckily, Jim Henson and his team were up to the challenge.
Yeah.
I also love a universe where we have a film where these turtles are all cartoons. Like
yeah,
these cartoons, like, interacting and fighting humans. I'm like, that would be a hilariously awesome movie. And I also love Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I'm like, they made it work in that, so would have been. And I think they made the right choice cinematically, going with Jim Henson. But I mean, I'm still open to the idea of making a Ninja Turtles movies where it's cartoons and humans.
yeah, yeah. That
I
would
mean,
be
I kind of love the idea, to be honest.
I think somebody's going to crack that nut eventually.
They
So
should.
yeah, yeah. I mean, because they keep remaking the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So like, this is the upteenth remake of the Turtles. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's going to happen soon.
We'll get there. Crossing our fingers.
So the next bit of trivia, to help disguise how cumbersome and slow the Turtles' costumes were, dialogue scenes were shot at 23 frames per second, so that when they were played at the normal speed of 24 frames per second, they appeared a bit sharper. For the same reason, fight scenes were shot at 22 or 23 frames per second. So, and that explains why they look so natural and fluid when they were fighting. Because I don't know if I would have paid attention to the talking or the conversations that the characters having so much as I was invested in the fighting. Like, people complain that this movie was violent. That's why I went to the movie. I went to see some violent turtles, and their movements were smooth and fluid, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, no one went to see the turtles talking.
Yeah.
They're not called the Teenage Mutant Talking Turtles.
Right.
I mean, that should be a giveaway. This next one is interesting, and I feel like we kind of touched on this topic.
Yeah.
So in the script and novelization, the young boy that Tatsu attacks was to die from the beating. The sounds of the boy breathing and others saying he would be all right were added at the last minute after the movie ratings board objected to the scene. In the French version of the movie, Shinso, show. I'm obviously great at pronouncing Japanese names. Shinsho does die. And
yeah,
I loved.
We're all great at pronouncing these strange names.
Yeah, names not in our language. It's right up my alley.
Right.
But I think that's it's interesting because one thing I was saying to again, this is a conversation I had with my son. He was like, "I'm kind of surprised this movie's rated PG," and I'm like, "Well, that scene right here that would have changed the rating," and I'm still surprised it's rated PG. But yeah, murdering. I mean, I think the kid was a teenage kid.
Yeah, yeah,
Murdering him, yeah, that would have been a rough. That would have been a rough sell, I think.
yeah, yeah. Just a teenage kid trying to follow orders, but they failed in their mission, and so Tattoos just started beating up all the teenagers and then saved the worst savagery for one in particular. So yeah, that was reading that in the French version that he actually kills a kid. That's kind of harsh, right? And I think that's why there were some people who objected to it. And I didn't put this in the trivia, but Jim Henson almost didn't do it because he kind of objected to the violence. And the actor that played April O'Neil, uh, Judith Hoag, she didn't appear in the sequel because she didn't like the violence. And maybe it was probably worse than what we got in the movie theater. So this is just the thing that we got the trivia on, but what if there were a lot more scenes where they did a lot more violent things? The only thing I can tell you is that Leonardo didn't cut anybody's arm or head off, so not violent enough. But that's just me. Like,
I mean, you're wielding those gigantic swords, man. Yeah.
yeah, somebody should have died.
How do you not cut off limbs?
Yeah, yeah. Or at least give them like a deep gash, like a lots of
Yeah,
bleeding.
not
Lots of
enough blood.
yeah, not enough blood. So when Raphael got knocked into the trash can by Casey Jones, the face and the animatronics inside. Oh, so it was Raphael. So it was that guy. The face and animatronics inside the head caved in and broke the stuntman's nose. Oh, it was stuntman, not the actual actor. So I guess
Oh yeah.
yeah, that's what happened. So as Ralph gets up from the trash can, he can be seen grabbing his nose area before the shot cuts. Ralph's original stuntman is replaced by one of the foot soldier stuntmen named Ken Scott. Ken did a lot of the major scenes as a foot soldier, including the nunchuck face-off against Michelangelo. So yeah, it was a stuntman, not the actor that played the
He
voice
earned that extra
and
stunt
the
work.
face. Yeah. He earned the extra stunt work. So wow, that's
That by the way, that's something else. I had forgotten about that. That's something else I think is insane. Is that you got the guys in the suits, but then you've got stuntmen. Why didn't you just get them to be the guys the whole time? You got stuntmen. Why weren't the stuntmen in the suits the whole time?
right. That
You
is
already are. You got VO for their voice. You don't need them to
right.
do it. So I'm like, wait, they kind of did some things odd in this movie. I feel like.
I'm thinking that I think that one of the characters was played by a guy who's an actor and a stuntman. And then some of the other characters were probably played by I don't know, because they weren't necessarily played by actors, and I didn't look too deep into it, but they normally weren't actors in the suits, so it's kind of hard to say. Maybe there were a number of people who were in the turtle suits. It's hard to say.
Well, I love the fact that they just were like, we need a new stuntman. We're just going to take you, because that is very indie, low budget. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I remember listening to Doug Stanhope, a comedian, talk about a movie he was in, and he's like, oh yeah, one of the scenes, the guy who was doing like the script supervisor had to come in and act in a scene because the actor didn't show up. And I'm
Right,
like, yeah, that's true to life, man. You just got to be like, crew, who wants to act?
right.
Like you already got a job we hired you for. You're now going to also be Raphael stuntman. I mean, it's true to it's Still the way it goes, 34 years later.
Yeah. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, so on a somber note, this is the last theatrical film that Jim Henson was associated with. Got about a month and a half after the film release. And also, with you mentioned it, he didn't like the movie because of the violence. So, I was like, oh, that's not great. But yes, it is what it is.
Yeah. He kind of did the movie as a favor to the director, but at the same time was like I said, I mean he works on Sesame Street, and that's really catering to a very young audience, and it's I think he may have been worried about his reputation as well. As like you're the kids show guy, you shouldn't be being involved in this somewhat adult adventure, I guess.
Yeah.
um
I mean, I think Miss Piggy was problematic.
yeah, that too. All right. The next bit of trivia, according to Josh Pice on the podcast I Was There Too, the director, Steve Barron, was fired near the end of production as the producers thought the film would become too dark. It is uncertain how different the film would have been if he had final cut. So that is kind of shocking. It's like the movie is almost wrap production and they decided to fire the director.
They took him out of the editing room, it sounds like, and they tried to edit it to be as family friendly as possible. Which
Probably.
I mean, it's a pretty dark movie, you know. Now they gave him full credit for being the director. I remember seeing his name, you know, prominently displayed as the director. But yeah, he probably had more. I'm guessing he was more of a comic book fan than a cartoon fan.
Yeah, that probably was it. And I think what it is that usually, like when I read stuff about directors not having final cut, it's usually the case where they just get locked out of the editing room. It's not normal for them to actually fire the director. So that's kind of shocking. I One of the movies I did was Jean-Claude Van Damme and Hard Target. I think John Woo was like a director who was locked out of the editing bay. It was Jean-Claude and his own editor that was editing the movie so that it featured Jean-Claude, right? So and, and Jean-Claude was his rationale was that because there was another actor in the film, I can't remember, it's Lance Henriksen. So originally the movie was going to feature Lance Henriksen more, but Jean-Claude's reasoning was when people don't go to the movies to see Lance Henriksen, they go to the movies to see Jean-Claude Van Damme. So that's how he edited the movie.
Yeah.
So that's kind of funny. So you hear a lot about that. When I'm doing this podcast, I've come across a lot of cases where the director is locked out of the editor's bay, but in this case, Josh got fired. So that's a step too far, I think. It was like it feels unnecessary to fire him, but that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, it seems a little harsh. And that's one thing that interests me. I'm like, this was an indie film, and they were able to just fire the director. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. I mean, maybe the movie would have been PG-13. Who knows? So, more trivia. Also, Jim Henson related. The turtles themselves were created by Jim Henson's Creature Shop in London. Jim Henson said the creatures were the most advanced that he had ever worked with. The creatures were first made out of fiberglass, then remolded out of clay. They were produced as molds to cast the whole body in foam rubber latex. The work of the shop was completed within 18 weeks, which is actually seems like a long time, but actually kind of impressive watching this film and being like, all right, there were some issues, but I mean, for this long ago that they were made, the mouths moved, the eyes moved. I'm like, yep, that was a
Oh yeah,
pretty impressive build.
and they had a full range of emotions, right? And
Yes.
that is what was surprising and what made it enjoyable was that the turtles were able to, like, they built animatronics that were able to emote, and so that we could, as an audience, so we could emphasize with them. So that was pretty awesome.
Yeah. No, it was a really impressive job by Jim Henson's crew. And I'm curious. I'm like, man, they I mean, I know they're still doing stuff, I'm sure, but like, man, they could. I wonder if the quality is the same as when he was alive, because it's like if they could do that in 1990, man,
Yeah,
imagine what they could do now. Like, whew.
yeah, I imagine they can do some amazing work. So the last bit of trivia, we have actor and martial artist Ernie Reyes Jr. He's brought on to replace an injured Hong Kong stuntman who had initially performed Donatello stunts. Reyes said the suit got so hot during filming that he had to drink a gallon of water a day just to keep hydrated. So, wow. His suits are hot.
That struck me as well. The thinking of being in that suit all day and how much just just you're just going to be soaking wet. Like you're just going to be drenched all the time. I knew a couple different people who played. I worked for the Tampa Bay Rays, the baseball team, and their mascot Raymond, and they have to take breaks to. I think they even had a backup costume to change into because they'd need to like change their clothes so they didn't smell.
Right.
Because it gets hot. Like just put on one of those mascot heads some point, and you feel like your head is in an oven. So yeah, I imagine no matter what time of year they shot this film, it was hellacious inside of those suits.
Well, I imagine it's easier in the wintertime than it is in the summertime. And they didn't, well, I didn't get to go through all of this trivia. And I'm sure I would have run across the time of year that they had made the movie so I could gauge just how uncomfortable the actors were. But
And they shot it in North Carolina,
yeah, they shot in North Carolina, so it's
so I
definitely
mean
going to
it
be
can get
warmer
pretty
down
hot
there.
there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Also cold. Depends.
it's and when it's the hot, it's really hot. When it's cold, it's really cold. That's the way it is over there.
Yeah. Not like if they shot this movie in Florida, they would have been replacing the stunt actors not for broken nose, but for death.
Yeah, yeah,
Like they would
absolutely.
mow through a bunch of people who just died in the suits. I'm still game for TMNT 4 with the Jim Henson costumes. If you just put me in one,
Right.
you got a stuntman to do his stunts, so I'll just stand.
Absolutely. All things for all people, I say. So that's it for the trivia. Let us go to and see what the critics thought. So I went on Rotten Tomatoes to find out what the critics were thinking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The critics gave it a 42%, which is shocking to me. The audience gave it an 81,
Ooh.
which I'm one of those. And IMDb reviews has it at 6.8 out of 10, which is comparable to, because with IMDb you kind of have to adjust for their system. So for IMDb, 6.8 is relatively high.
Yeah,
it's not
that's good.
it's not similar to how they do it on other platforms. So let us know what the first couple of critics thought.
So Patrick Hicks from the Feel and Film podcast says, The first iteration of the Turtle Brothers on the big screen balances grittiness and campy while managing to give us one of the best origin stories of the IP. I like his review.
Yeah.
Valley, easy for me to say, this is a common name. Valerie Monroe from Entertainment Weekly says, so should you take your kid to see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? I'm not recommending that you do. This movie will not enrich your child's worldview. I tried to do my best Karen voice there because that's how I feel. Like, thanks, Karen.
Yeah, I agree. I don't
You
understand
won't
why.
enrich your child's worldview. We're coming to have fun, not to enrich our worldview. What do you think a movie's for,
Right.
Aaron?
I can understand how there are a lot of movies that do that enrichment, but not all movies have to be that way. Not all movies have to be this thought-provoking, educational, life-changing deal. It could be just pure entertainment, which is what the Teenage Mutant Ninja
Fun.
Turtles is. And
Captain
it,
Underpants.
it teaches them to work together. Like in the beginning, you had some of the brothers, they didn't really get along, and then like by the end of the movie, they're all giving themselves high fives. They're acting like brothers again. They've been brought closer together by rescuing their father. So there are a lot of themes in here that will at least shows how people can change over time. Maybe not necessarily changing a child's worldview, but showing how, for instance, brothers can get along. So there's that. So
and Raphael being a rageaholic, it came to bite him in the butt. I mean,
yeah,
you can't be that guy. You got to be cool.
right. And he learned to chill out. So yeah, or at least a little bit. He tempered it a little bit because that was what Splinter was asking of him. You could kind of tell that this is kind of a Raphael centric movie. It's maybe not Raphael centric, but it kind of leans on Raphael more than the other.
Yeah, he's the lead turtle, I would say, in the film. But yeah, no, I get sick of that. I'm like, there can just be movies that don't need to have a worldview message.
Yeah,
it can just be enjoyable.
Right.
You don't need to always be preaching in your movie.
Yeah,
it can just be a fun movie to watch. Which this one was great. It was gritty.
Yeah,
but it was still enjoyable and fun. And yes, I do think there are lessons to be learned, like you said. But even if there weren't, who cares?
Yes,
I'm watching a movie to have fun, not to learn about life.
Yeah, I was thoroughly entertained. So I think the movie did its job. If I walk out feeling better than when I walked in, and I certainly did.
Amen.
So we have Richard Harrington from the Washington Post who wrote, "Truth be told, there's something amusingly surreal in watching these happy-go-lucky men-sized terps engage in full-scale punch-in kickouts with the inevitable villains." I'm like, yes, absolutely. Richard gets it.
He gets it. Way to go, Richard.
Finally, we have Jamie Russell from the BBC.com who wrote, "Four pizza-loving turtles emerge from their shells to battle crime in this inexplicably successful kiddie flick, which now looks as dated as it is silly." I'm not going to totally dump on Jamie. There is some truth to that. There is some dating, a little bit. And if it looks silly, it's supposed to be silly. We do want some silliness. It's for giant turtles. It's kind of hard not to be silly. It's there. It's a feature. It's not a bug.
Yeah. Did you catch the concept that these four turtles encountered ooze and became teenagers and giant? Because that's kind of and the rat and the shrimp. Like, this isn't supposed to be like, oh, this could happen in real life.
Yeah.
And yes, it's dated. I'm guessing she wrote this review like in the last 10 years.
Yeah, probably.
Of course it's dated. It's from 1990. You watch other movies from 1990, and you're like, man, they did a really good job of the faking it. Like
Yeah.
I watched Total Recall recently, and the stuff in that, other than the three boobed lady, does not age nearly as well as Ninja Turtles. Like again, I don't know the words, but the CGI, the special effects, whatever you want to call it, doesn't
Yeah.
age nearly as well as the Ninja Turtles. And I'm like, what? Come on, give it a break, man. Like, this is good for its time.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. I don't like but it got like 47%, 42%. So there were a lot of people
Yeah,
that
the critics
had a
suck.
problem. Had a
Well, when
problem
there's a
with the movie.
chasm that big, almost 40% between the audience and the critics, you know the critics are assholes.
Um
Like, that's it. Like, if everyone loved this movie, except for the critics are wrong.
no, I don't know. I don't want to say that the critics are wrong, because I think that this is a case where the movie isn't for them, right? Is this speaking specifically for the target audience? So, for example, there are a lot of Christian movies that come out, and a lot of times with these Christian movies, they'll get a very low critic score and a very high audience score, because for a critic watching a movie, a lot of these, because a lot of the Christian films are kind of the same. They follow a certain like format,
Formula.
and
Yeah.
it's the format that the audience is expecting, the target audience is expecting. And so when they see it, they enjoy it. And when they go on Rotten Tomatoes, they get a high review or a very positive review, because the intended, it does what the intended audience wants it to do, where a critic who's watching all of the movies and is not necessarily part of the audience, it's not going to give a very high review. The same way with certain there's Tyler Perry movies. His movies tend to get like a high audience score. It depends. Like lately, he's just been putting out garbage. But I think earlier in his career, he would consistently receive low critic scores and high audience scores, because the intended audience is going to love his movies, and where critics are looking at everything and they're like, they see all the cliches, they see all the overused tropes. They
Yeah,
see,
they don't like silliness.
well, they can
They
do
think it's
silliness.
beneath them.
I think what they have a problem with is are tropes that are overused, or tropes that lead to, when a movie is entirely too predictable, right? All movies are predictable to a certain extent, but when a movie is way too predictable, that can, it's almost like the movie is spoiling itself. Like you're watching a movie that's been spoiled, and so you don't get the
Sure.
enjoyment out of it that you want. So I can understand how the critics would feel about certain movies, including this one. They're
Well,
just not
yeah, and
surprised.
I'll give some credence. I'll jump on your side a little bit. Everyone watching this movie knew the Ninja Turtles were going to win,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it's the same reason I said I'm not going to watch. I don't enjoy James Bond movies anymore, because yeah, he's always going to have some MacGuffin, special crazy thing that can win. And then someone who I was complaining about James Bond films, I'm like, when James Bond dies at the end of the movie, that's when I'll start watching James Bond movies. And he's like, well, it happened in this movie. And I'm like, well, now I can't watch it, can I?
I think that
I
one of
brought
the
that on myself, in fairness.
right. I think one of the things about James Bond, would be interesting if they make a James Bond movie where no one ever finds out that he's a spy. Because spies aren't supposed to get found out, and he's supposed to be like the
Right?
greatest super spy. They call him a super spy, so that would suggest that he's never found out. But in every single movie, he's always found out.
He just tells people.
I would at least like to see one mission where they, like, it doesn't have to be the whole movie. It could be that the beginning part of the movie to show how awesome he is as a spy. Just the beginning of the movie, before they show the
How
credits.
cool would it be? The whole movie, you go through it, and the very last line is, "Who are you, anyways?" Bond, James Bond.
Yeah,
Like the whole movie, and the very last line, you're like, "Oh my god, this is a 007 movie."
right,
I didn't
right,
know it
right.
the whole movie.
Yeah,
That would be great.
awesome. That would be awesome.
Now, no one would go watch it because you can't advertise it.
No,
as a
here's what would
007
happen.
movie.
I think it would spread by word of mouth. Well, first of all, it would have to be a good movie in the first place. Like it would have to be a movie so good that people
Yeah,
would
but
go to see it regardless if it's a James Bond movie or not. And then when the reveal happens, and then the word of mouth, people would tell their friends, you got to go see it. You got to wait till the end, right? And then that'll work. And then the internet would take over and spoil the movie. So you have to see the movie in the first or second week.
yeah, it's a double edged, because again, I like, that would be the greatest James Bond movie ever.
Yeah,
Is
absolutely.
not knowing that it's him until the
Right.
very last. Like, that's fade to black. Like,
Yeah.
who are you, anyways? Bond, James Bond.
Right. That would work.
I don't know if that was Connery or. I don't do accents very well.
Yeah, I know. We all struggle with that. So finally, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is, as of this recording, available on streaming on Paramount Plus, which I am finding out really is the worst streaming service. That's it for today. Next week, I'm joined by the host of the eclectic and beautifully produced podcast called Least Important Things with Luke Ferris. You can follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Don't forget that you can contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at fanmail@backlickcinema.com. Don't forget to write in. Let me know what your favorite parts is. Jeff, do you have any additional plugs?
No, just stay tuned on the social media. I'm gonna have a movie coming out probably early 2025, I'm guessing, maybe mid. And Haunted Happy Hour, which I was just an actor in, that comes out probably within a month or two, probably pretty soon. So I don't know, if you follow me, I'll tell you all these things. And I'll figure out a way to get Zoe to have a cameo in one of my movies. I think we'll figure something out. I got 6 in the hopper. Like, I'm ready to just jam them out. So we'll figure out a way to get Zoe in them. So follow me on socials, and if I show up in your feed, which is not a given, I'll let you know.
Awesome. That sounds excellent. So one last time, if you like the show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlick Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters, and I know that you've enjoyed Jeff Macolino, so please check out the Jeff Macolino Podcast. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from yesterday with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.